Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
There's no actual written history about how it started. Now, there was a creative story about an Arab who used a stomach of an animal to transport camel's milk across the desert, and he started with milk, and by the time he got there he had cheese. And that's because the central enzyme used in making milk into cheese, it's a coagulant, it's inside the stomach of a ruminant animal. So that's what rennet is. Now we have it in tablet form, which I'll show you in a little bit. So the cheese making process is using that enzyme to remove the water from the milk, and what you're left over with is the fats and the proteins, and that's cheese. First of all, you sterilize the pan, and that's because if you're going to age a cheese, and I'm planning to age this one, any of the bacteria, both good and bad, will work on that cheese while it's aging. So you sterilize the pot by just putting in a little bit of water, boiled it for 10 minutes with the lid on, so both the lid and the pan are, sterile before I put the milk in. Then I poured the milk in, and then I added about a half a cup, and I should say I've got 2 gallons of milk in here. I added a half a cup of buttermilk, and that's going to kind of acidify or ripen the milk. And so we let it come up to room temperature, because the warmer it is, to a degree anyway, the more those enzymes will work in the milk. Okay, so now it's about 12 hours later, and we're ready to start the cheese making process. So I've got it on a low heat. We're at 81 degrees. We're going to bring it up to 86. And then I'm going to put in the magic rennet, and hopefully it will do its thing. And I always tell in classes that if the action of the rennet isn't right, it's usually not the fault of the rennet. It's something else to do with the milk or the ripening, or maybe it was over processed. We have ultra heat treated milk out there on the shelves now. And I know you've seen it. It's in like a plastic, looks like, the juice box containers. That's what they put milk in now. It will last for months unrefrigerated because it's been ultra high treated or ultra heat treated at a very high temperature just for a couple of seconds. But what that does is it kills all the bacteria in it. So you need some bacteria to make cheese. So in-home cheese making, don't ever use that. It won't work. The store whole milk. You can also use skim. 1%, 2% are whole. You're going to get more fat, therefore more cheese in the higher fat content milk. But you can do skim. Probably most of the mozzarella on the shelves is skim milk or low fat skim if you've ever read the labels. So, but for our purposes, I want all the fat we can get in here because it gives it that much more flavor. I'm going to pour that in. I'm going to turn my heat off. I should mention I use a pretty heavy-bodied, heavy bottom pan. You should only use stainless steel or a really nicely enameled pan. You don't want to ever use cast iron or aluminum. They will both react with the enzymes and the acids, and it won't destroy your pan necessarily, but it'll ruin, it can discolor and put your cheese off flavor. So stainless steel is by far the best, and you'll notice I'm even using a stainless steel spoon. I got interested in cheese making kind of an odd way. When my children were little, I used to read every night to them, half an hour, and I read the whole series of Little House on the Prairie books. And in one of the very first ones, they talk about how they made cheese, and this is 150 years ago. And the only reason it came up was one of their relatives had a pair of twin calves, I think it was, and one died. And everyone was excited because they had the stomach lining of the dead calf. So it meant they had rennet to make cheese. Because no one, in those days, they weren't going to slaughter a calf just for the rennet. But one died, and it was, I think, 2 days old, so it was the perfect age to get that. And so they went through the whole process of how they, it's setting up right now, how they got the rennet in little strips, how they dried it, how they used it, and then even how they made the cheese. And I thought, they can do that back then. I should be able to do this now. You know, take the modern step, go onto the internet and look up cheese making supplies. And I mean, there's kits out there, there's all kinds of stuff to try it. So this yellow spot right here where you can kind of see it like that, and even in the clear spots where it's breaking a little bit, that's whey, and that's the water that's separating out of the cheese. This is, if anything in cheese making, this is what I tell students, this is the critical step. You want to be able to recognize what is called clean break. And a clean break means that when I stick my finger in at a 45-degree angle and lift up, it should split right down my finger. So I'm going to give that a try. Oh darn, that is just right there. You see that? And see that there's really no milk left on my finger. It looks clear. That's what we call a clean break. So the next step is I'm going to cut this cheese, and there's numerous ways to do it, but I'll show you how I've learned. And you basically want, when you're done, about 1/2-inch cubes of cheese. And doing this is what's going to help release more rennet. And you can probably see that. I'll turn it about 90 degrees. Try and get the cheese to turn with the pan. Now I'm going to go across it this way. Now I'm going to go across the cheese. And again, if we want 1/2-inch cubes, of course there's only one way to get. And you can kind of see my cubes starting to float around in here. And you notice the yellow whey, which is really coming out now. This is the point, if you wanted cottage cheese, you would stop with it. You'd heat it a little bit more, and then what's going to happen next is I'm going to turn the heat on again, and we're going to try and heat it up to around 100 degrees, and now the heat will now also contract the curds. So you kind of have a couple things working, couple forces working on those curds, the rennet, of course, and then the heat. And see how they're kind of larger on the bottom? You're not supposed to smash them, just cut them up. I'm looking towards a hard cheese, so I'm going to try and get it to, 102 degrees. You can stop at 96 degrees and have a softer cheese. And by soft, I don't mean spreadable, but it just won't harden up quite as much. Ideally, you should have a cheese cave, but I don't. I do have a cold storage room downstairs, and I've also used the refrigerator. So, depending on how much you're into it, if you were making a batch every other week, your fridge would fill up pretty quick. But I do have a cold storage room downstairs, and the ideal aging temperature is between, I think, 50 and 55 degrees for cheese. Now, specialty cheeses like a blue cheese need to have a lot of humidity. For every gallon of milk that you use, you get approximately 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of cheese. So it gives you an idea how much water you're pouring out. I mean, a gallon of milk weighs about 6 pounds, and you end up with 1.5 pounds of cheese. So there's our curds, there's our whey. Now, if we were going to make mozzarella with this, which I could do, we would put it back into a brine, a saltwater brine, and heat it up to, I think, about 170 degrees, and then start pulling it like taffy. It's really kind of cool. It does do that. You can kind of see where it's a little stretchy here. See? Now, this is called your follower, which we're going to put on there. But first, before I do that, I'm going to just gently fold this over. It's kind of like a hanky. So we're going to fold the 4 corners of the hanky over. Then I'm going to put the follower on there. And then I'm going to line this up. And see, that has to fit right in there. This was online $79. It was the least expensive one I could find. And it was made, what I liked about it is it's made of this kind of heavy food grade plastic. And so it, you can run this part through the dishwasher if you want to. So now here's the, can you hear that? And you can see the whey is kind of bubbling up a little bit in there. The way we usually press cheese, and certainly in a press, In different recipes, it might say 5 pounds of pressure for 10 minutes. Then take it out, flip it over, apply 10 pounds of pressure for 10 minutes. Take it out, flip it over. What I generally do with this one is I just take it down until it really is giving me some resistance and leave it. This is the only disadvantage of one of these kind is you don't know how many pounds of pressure you're putting on. But I can judge by how much of the whey is coming out and how far I can do it. If I can't get it anymore, that's it. But I'll pour off any excess from the top too. Last step before putting your cheese in the storage for a couple months or however long you can stand it is waxing. But this is how I do it. Just kind of roll it around. And if you keep your cheese cool, and mine is because I just got it out of the fridge, then the wax will get hard on it quite quickly. From everything I've read, it says more thin layers are better than one thick layer. And you want to be careful that you do get all of it covered, because this is the only thing between your cheese and the outside world. That's what it looks like as an aged cheese. I usually have it done and pressed in 2 hours, so it's not real time consuming either.
If you enjoyed this segment of Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground, consider making a contribution at lptv.org. If you have segment ideas pertaining to North Central Minnesota, contact us at legacy@lptv.org. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund by the vote of the people on November 4th, 2008.